Trove's combat and how you build classes can be broken up into 3 categories. Speed farming, where you're trying to complete dungeons as fast as possible, which means you need to have a class that has a really good base movement speed, and you will sacrifice some damage or survivability in order to have movement speed on all of your gear. Delves, which is a combination of damage and health. You need to be tanky enough to survive all of the enemies that you're going to be fighting because it is a long, drawn-out battle. And Leviathans are all about damage. You don't need to survive if you can kill it before it kills you. The efficiency of a class can basically be broken down into these 3 categories. Some will be stronger than others in one area, but weaker in another. I did actually make another video with a visual graphic that kind of just summarizes where each of the classes fit in the spectrum. I would always recommend that you play the class you enjoy, rather than picking a class out of efficiency, because you risk getting bored. So assuming you've picked out your main, let's get started with the more detailed tutorial. Today we're going to be covering the Pirate Captain. Pirate Captain is one of those classes that everyone kind of underestimates. Like, you wouldn't believe the amount of people that say, oh, this is a bad class or it's not very strong. And that's because, generally speaking, the class doesn't feel very strong right away. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it for speed farming, but you could use it as a boss killer, because there's kind of a trick that you can do where you throw down one of your ultimate ability and then you use the chromatic emblem to reduce your cooldown so that you can throw down another one and another one. And yeah, essentially you can end up stacking tons and tons of damage this way. But obviously you do go through a lot of potions, and it also requires a lot of time investment just because you have to wait to put down another one, versus another class that might just deal raw, strong damage right away without much button input. So for the subclass ability, you have a couple options. You could use the Knight subclass ability to give you that extra flask capacity, but generally speaking, almost all the time, everyone's going to choose Solarian just because it gives you a lot of extra light. Now, I want to address something that I didn't talk about in my most recent Knight tutorial, which is that just because I am suggesting which subclass abilities you want to use doesn't necessarily mean that you can't experiment. A lot of the subclass abilities are a lot stronger than you would think, and you can kind of get away with using any of them. Now, ignoring the stats that I have on my gear, I would say that the priority stats that you're going to go for is going to be crit damage and attack speed. The only reason you would end up potentially swapping out the crit damage for movement speed would be if you are trying to use this class as an all-around main. So the hidden ring effect that you're going to go for with Pirate Captain, he's got a couple different options. One is all hands on deck, which uses Man of War, now summons a Parrot Cannoneer as well. A Vast Yi, basic attacks cause minions to attack the player's target, as well as applying a debuff that increases damage, and Raiders, which first mate has a chance to spawn doubloons when it hits enemies. Honestly, you can choose either a Vast Yi or all hands on deck. The best banner in pretty much all cases is going to be the torches from Leviathans, whether it be the weakest torch up to the permit torch. Your best ally in slot is going to be Starry Skyfire, because it gives you light, magic damage, and increased cooldown recovery speed, which you need for your ultimate. In order to get Starry Skyfire as an ally, you're going to have to get this node right here on the skill tree, which is fine because you need to have the light node anyway. So if you don't already know about the Trove skill tree, there's the hub. You come over here into the Astrolabe, and yeah, I've got other videos that focus on the skill tree. So the main nodes that I would recommend is the lifesteal node. This will make you pretty much invincible. The movement speed nodes, just because it can be really annoying being really slow, and the light nodes, because you're gonna need that for the extra damage. Additionally, and I didn't include this in my Knight video, and I'm sorry about that, you can invest in these abilities right here, because these will end up giving you crit hit and crit damage. Now, for the top of the skill tree, I'm invested in both physical damage and magic damage, with physical coming a little higher. So all you would do as a magic main is swap out these 2 nodes for these 2 instead. So you have a couple different flask options. Pretty much all the ones that I have favorited are going to be the best ones in the game. Conjurer's Crucible will give you extra flash charges when you trigger Magic Find, which can end up being pretty good for you, because in my skill tree we did have Life Leech. It kind of makes makes you invincible with pretty much every character in the game, but for my money, I still almost always just use Death Defying because I'm lazy. But in Pirate's Captain's case, you might want to end up using the Elysian Bandolier if you're trying to be a boss killer, because you need as much flask as possible. Now, your emblems are going to change based on how you play the game. It's not really that complicated, but basically when you're first starting out and you have really low crit hit, you're going to be using Sure Strike pretty much all the time, and Arcane Emblem you'll never be able to get away from, unfortunately. As you slowly end up building up enough crit, you can swap that out for Chromatic Emblem so that you can be a boss killer, because the cooldown is going to give you the advantage of being able to cast your ult multiple times. However, some other alternatives is Unyielding Emblem if your survivability is really low, and Trailblazing if you need to go fast, like say you're doing dungeons and stuff rather than bosses. So ignoring my stats that I have on the character, the stats that you're going to be aiming for is pretty much the same as in my night video. So you're going to be focusing on around 80,000 magic damage, and anything higher than that is obviously going to be very nice. I'm talking about the base magic damage, not necessarily with multipliers. Crit hit, you're honestly aiming from 60% and up. Your ultimate goal is to get it to 100%, and crit damage you want to have at 800% and higher than that. Otherwise, anything else beyond that is just going to end up being good, and you're trying to kind of keep them all even. But how do you do that? Well, that comes with the gems. Now, before we talk about the gems, I get this question a lot about people asking like how they can end up increasing their power rank and so on and so forth. And the first question I always ask them is, are you level 30? Because you need to max out a class before you even bother trying to focus on getting to the mid to end game. You need to end up having your class at 30 so that you have all of your gem slots unlocked. Now, I'm going to be swapping to my Shadow Hunter. Just keep in mind that the gem stats are basically going to be the same on Pirate, save for the physical damage is going to be swapped out for magic damage instead. I also want to be very clear, I don't have the highest coefficiency or anything. I don't really care because I can still kill everything in this game anyways, and this video is most of all to make it as easy to understand as possible. So with that said, you'll notice on your lesser gems and in power gems that there's going to be these pearls or boosters on the stats. What you're going to be doing for your lesser gems is going 3x3. So 3 of your lesser gems are going to have magic damage 2 pearl, crit damage 1 pearl, and then crit hit. And then the other 3 gems are going to have 2 pearls crit damage, 1 pearl magic damage, no pearls crit hit. Of course, as you eventually end up getting your crit hit to 100%, then you can start cycling crit hit off of some of your gems to give you more survivability with max health. The cosmic lesser gems, however, are a little trickier to get properly set up because you have to have all of your pearls into light, and then the extra stats obviously being magic damage and crit damage. Now, talking about empowered gem abilities, which ones are you going to be aiming for? Pyrodisc is kind of just a must for every class in the game at this point because the amount of movement speed that you end up getting from it. Technically, you won't need it as you are building your pirate for a boss killer. Cubic Curtain can be one that will help you with a lot of survivability just because you are going to end up getting that shield that will tank some damage for you. But are you struggling with survivability to begin with? Explosive Epilogue can be really good on Pirate Captain when you're dealing with large mobs of enemies, because with all of your turrets dealing with all of the enemies and damaging all of them, it means that when an enemy dies, they'll explode and cause chain reaction damage. Obviously not good for a boss killer because the boss isn't going to have any minions around. However, the class gem ability is highly recommended on this class because the artillery class gem will end up making it so that you can summon 2 little parakeet turret guys, which essentially gives you double their firepower. Now, lastly, there's going to end up being the Cosmic Empowered Gem ability, which this again depends. The Vampirium gem is going to give you a lot of survivability, but you also get a little bit of movement speed, so it can be really good if you're trying to use the character as a main for everything, including speed farming. Otherwise, Berserk Battler is going to be your best bet because this is going to end up adding light to your character that ultimately will give you a lot more damage. I want to give a huge thank you to you guys for watching these videos and supporting me over all of these years. It really does mean a lot, and I'm actually quite proud of these tutorials tutorials, I've been trying to experiment with how can I make it fresh and new as well as better than my previous tutorials. So I hope that I've done that. I would very much appreciate if you leave a like, you can leave a comment, or just watch one of my other videos because apparently that counts the same as when you leave a comment. I am blatantly asking you to help with the engagement of my channel so that videos can get recommended a bit more. And yeah, I'm sorry that this video is a day late because I technically wanted to work on it yesterday, but I wasn't feeling too well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it for today's video. If you want to see more content, YouTube thinks that this would probably be your best option, but maybe you're just interested in seeing my most recent upload, which is going to be right over here. It's actually Jub's birthday today. She's 7 years old now. Crazy how fast time flies.